So why don't we just start by setting a motivation for what we're going to do? And we can think that we're about to spend some time together working on the skill of Tibetan debate. And if we think about why it is that we want that, you can think about whatever version of a positive motivation makes the most sense for you. But as much as possible, try to make the intention be as long-term as possible and as expansive as possible to benefit others as far out as you can reach, as much as possible. Okay. And with that motivation in our hearts, we can do all the things we do. So how are you guys doing? Doing okay? Good. I'm glad. Well, let me start by asking, first of all, have folks had any chance since last we met to try to practice debate a little bit? Maybe not. I know it's hard.
We did last Sunday, and we actually had some questions, and Andrew's been doing some amazing things. So I guess, I don't know if Sheila had a chance to forward you our questions, or...
No, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
We could send him, I don't know, Andrew, you could send him the Google link, and I can post the questions in the chat.
Yep.
To me, whatever's easiest.
Yeah, let me forward the email to you, I think.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, because the reply then has the questions. Okay. I think I've got, yeah, there we go. But yeah, the questions that came out of our session last week, so we attempted to go through from end to end. And the first one was, where does the how compare fit into the entire structure? We were struggling with that.
Good. That's
The overall flow of a debate. Yeah.
Okay.
I think partly too.
Okay.
Yes.
So how comparison of phenomena, how does that fit into debate? Well, again, in light of the new perspective or new insight that Venerable Donyo kind of helped me come to, if I had it to do over, I mean, I don't know, who am I, but if I were to do it, I don't think I would start with the comparisons of phenomena anymore. I think my guess is that the reason that Daniel Perdue starts with the comparison of phenomena is to establish the ways in which things can be logically linked, because that's the basis on which syllogisms work, and syllogisms are the basis in which consequences work, right? So I think he's starting from the ground up. But in terms of how debate actually flows, the comparison of phenomena is something that you could debate with somebody else. You know, in other words, you could, in essence, ask somebody, take these two things, how do they compare, right? And then the person would think about it and give you an answer, and then you could start debating that answer. You could basically try to either show them that there's a mistake, or kind of check whether there might be a mistake, or whether there's some implication that they haven't realized. So it could be kind of the starting point, if that makes sense, for a whole debate. Likewise, in the course of a debate, somebody might make some claim about how things relate to each other or don't relate to each other. And you might say, wait, hold on a minute, then those two things that you're just talking about, how do they compare? You know? And so it could be like a branch within the larger debate, if that makes sense. I have one more thing to say about that, but is that clear so far?
I think we were sort of had a hint of that during our discussion, but it's very clear that a debate can go in so many directions. Andrew was the challenger, and so he was remembering he could say, you know, come up with, but even I was trying to picture how to even track the debate while it was going on,
Yes.
sort of thing. So
Yes. Yes, I can say a little bit more about that, but the other thing I wanted to say about the comparisons of phenomena is that even though we don't have to think about it in so many words, we don't have to kind of mindfully be thinking about it in this way. When you think about a consequence, take this like a complete consequence with a reason, right? Let's even just say a syllogism. The subject A, it is B because it is C. The relationship between C and B, or B and C, however you want to look at it, right? The relationship between the predicate of your statement and the reason that you're giving, the sign that you're giving, you have to ask, how do those two things compare to each other, right? So if I say, take the subject Snoopy, it follows that it is an animal because it is a dog, right? I'm making a claim here about how animal and dog relate to each other, about how they compare, right? And only some ways that the two things can compare would make this a valid syllogism. This is only a valid syllogism if those two things are either mutually inclusive, or if between them there are three possibilities, such that if it's a dog, it is necessarily an animal, but if it's an animal, it's not necessarily a dog. Right? Now, like, let me say this: you don't have to memorize this, you don't have to stay mindful of that, but the logic underlying that is very important. But I think we can intuit the logic underlying that even without thinking about it that way. But if I were to posit a reason that compares with the predicate as four possibilities, or as mutually exclusive, or even as three possibilities in the other direction, that wouldn't work. Like, for example, if I said, you know, take the subject Garfield, like, let's say there was a real cat named Garfield, just to, you know, Snoopy. Take the subject Garfield, it follows that it is a cat because it is an animal. That's those two things. There's three possibilities between them, but it goes in the wrong direction, so the syllogism doesn't work. Or if I said, take the subject Snoopy, it follows that it is still alive because it is an animal. That's four possibilities, so that doesn't work. And certainly if I said, take the subject Snoopy, it follows that it is a dog because it is a cat. That's mutually exclusive, so it evidently doesn't work.
Does it just come with practice and time? Because, and I'm going to make myself sound really, really dumb here, and it's for posterity on the internet.
Yes, right.
But the fact that you were able to say so quickly that dog and cat is mutually exclusive.
Well, no, that's just because I'm a genius, you know. It's just practice. It's just practice. Yes. Yeah, it's yeah, it at a certain point, like with practice, like the comparisons of phenomena, well, each piece of it really, with enough practice, at a certain point it just clicks to the point that you start, like, not literally visually, but you start basically seeing things like that when you think about them. You know, like elm and tree compares three possibilities. You know, like, it's clear, it's not, you don't have to think about it, right? Now, of course, there are going to be lots and lots of cases where you do have to stop and think about it, just because you don't understand the subject well enough. Like, I know what an elm is, I know what a tree is, so I know. that there are three possibilities. But if you said, like, take the subject, or, how do the two, let's say, non-existent and imaginary compare? I don't know, like, I've never thought about it before, so that I'd have to think for a moment. But the shape of what it means for them to compare in the different ways is still clear because of having even whatever little bit of practice I have. And likewise with a consequence, kind of to know whether to say the reason's not established, or there's no pervasion, or why, or I accept, like what the correct answer is that's the point. Like, you'll always have to think about it, because otherwise there wouldn't be a debate. But once you understand what you believe, what the format of the answer is that becomes second nature. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the structure different than the content.
Yes. Yeah. The structure, it's like climbing up the hill so that we can ski down the hill. Like learning the structure, internalizing the structure, which is what we're doing together. That's like climbing up the hill. Once you have the structure down, then the real work is just, well, what are the facts of the matter of what we're debating? It's like, you can learn, like, let's say you learn how to do like long division. I wonder if they still teach that in school, but probably all of us at least learn it. Let's say you learn how to do long division. Now you know how to do it, as long as you remember, like now you know how to do it, but you don't automatically know what, any given number divided by any other given number is. You have to go through the process, but you know the process. The process is second nature if you do it enough. Right? Like the Tibetans say, nothing gets harder with practice. Right? Any other questions that would be helpful to address before we talk more? I mean, I'm happy to address any and all questions. Did you share?
Can you just review? There is no pervasion, which one it refers to, and the other one?
Oh, okay. And I just now saw.
Reason is not established, but there is no pervasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's my request. It's off topic, but if we can say that at the end, perhaps.
For what? I'm sorry.
I shared the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, maybe just because I don't want to presume on anybody, like, and what anybody wants to do, maybe what we can do is those of us who are able and willing, we can stick around afterwards and do it together. That's fair. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Shannon. That was very thoughtful. Very thoughtful. So yes, the answers.
Yeah.
So so the challenger, I'm gonna just say, when I say you're the defender right now, the challenger is going to fling a consequence at you. And again, there's two types of consequence that the challenger can fling. They can either fling what I've come to call a simple consequence, which is just either just the subject and a predicate, or else just a statement of pervasion. It's just a statement, basically. They're not offering any evidence for it, right? So I could say, take the subject, an elm, it follows that it's a tree. Or take the subject, an elm, it follows that it's a mammal. It's wrong, Or I could say, it follows that whatever is white is necessarily a color, or whatever is a white horse is necessarily white, like it's just a statement that I'm throwing out there. To that, you have two options. If you hear that statement and you think, no, yes, that statement is true, I believe that statement to be true,
I accept.
Exactly. And otherwise, if you anything other than I believe that statement to be true, you'd say why. Right? And again, and you probably remember this, but just for the thorough review of the mechanism, if you say why, for the purposes of that moment in the debate, you're committing to the reverse, just so that we have some basis to debate, right? Otherwise, we'd have no basis to debate, like if you didn't commit to, an elm being a tree, but you also didn't commit to an elm not being a tree, then you're just kind of sitting there, if that makes sense. I mean, of course, the truth might be that you don't know, right? Of course, the truth might be that you don't know, but in this system, we find out by testing hypotheses. So you have to pick a hypothesis to test, right? So if you say why, it's automatically implied that you're committed to the opposite. So if I'm the challenger and you just said why, I have two choices, basically. I can either say, well, it follows that, and then the opposite, or I can say, I can give you the reason. Take the subject, an elm, it follows that it's a tree. And you say why, I could say, because it is a species of tree. That's the reason I'm giving you, right? Okay. So far, so good? Okay. Then the other type of consequence that the challenger can fling is it's like a full consequence in a sense. It's a three-part consequence, they call it, but basically it's a consequence that has a reason in it, right? So if you hear the word because, you'll know that it's a consequence with a reason. If you don't hear the word because, I'm pretty sure, I mean, unless you guys establish a different convention, like using a different word, but like typically the word because is the signal. I think the two, three-part consequence that has a reason and a consequence that includes the word because, I think they're mutually inclusive, I think, right? So in other words, I'm going to say blah, 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 because blah, 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 blah. Everything that came after because, that's the reason I'm giving. That's the sign that I'm positing, right? So if you have that, now you have three options. And you need to have three options so you can cover all of the logical bases of everything that could possibly be the case. So what you have to do when you hear that is there's two steps you have to take mentally before you say anything. Right? The moment there's a reason, first you have to think about the relationship between the subject and the reason. Skip over the predicate, right? The subject and the reason. Take the subject, an elm, it follows that it is a tree because it is a species of tree. So the first thing you do is you think, okay, take the subject, an elm. Is it a species of tree? Right? And if the answer is no, or if the answer is, as far as you know, it's not, right? If it's anything other than, oh yeah, I know that to be true, then what you'd say is the reason is not established, which means either I believe that's the opposite of what's true, or nobody's established to me yet that that's true, right? That's similar to saying why, if you think about it, right? You can't say why because I just told you, I just gave you a reason, but you're saying, well, basically like, well, why is that reason, right? So in the same way, when you say why, you're committing to the opposite of the statement. If you say the reason is not established, you're committing to the opposite of the reason being established. That makes sense. So if I say, take the subject, an elm, it follows that it's a tree because it is a species of tree, and you say the reason is not established, then I can either prove the reason to you, or I can say, take the subject, an elm. It follows that it is not a species of tree, and you have to accept that.
You would say that in either case, if the subject, if the pervasion, it has to match the pervasion.
I haven't mentioned pervasion yet. This is the
The
subject.
predicate I meant.
The predicate hasn't, believe it or not, the predicate hasn't come in yet. Let me put it to you this way. Take the subject, a space shuttle. It follows that it is because it is made of cheese. Okay?
The reason not established.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what the predicate was that I said, right? It makes no difference. I could have said a predicate that is true. I could have said a predicate that is false. I could have said a predicate. It doesn't matter because simply a space shuttle is not made of
Not made
cheese.
of cheese.
The end.
So, so the reason has to match the subject.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then there's no pervasion means it doesn't match the predicate.
So I'll get to that. I'll get to that in just one moment. In just one moment. Just want to make this very clear first. So if I say take the subject, space shuttle, it follows the because it is made of cheese, right? You say the reason is not established, then I can either try to prove to you that it's made of cheese, or I can say, okay, then take the subject, a space shuttle, it follows that it is not made of cheese. And you have to accept that because you just said that the other opposite reason wasn't established. Are we good so far? Yeah, okay. So that's the first thing you do internally. So if the reason is not true of the subject as stated in the manner stated, if that sentence wouldn't be true, if you connected that reason to that subject to that reason, then you have to say the reason is not established. So if I said, take the space shuttle, it follows that when it is launched from Florida because it is made of cheese. The answer is the reason is not established. Right? Because it simply just isn't made of cheese. Now, if you think about it and it turns out that the reason is established. So if I said, take the subject, the space shuttle, it follows the because it is a man-made object. Right? Then you think about it and say, well, yeah, the space shuttle is a man-made object. Right? So now that's where you have to look at what was the predicate that I said, the part that I went like this for, right? Now you have to look, what's the predicate? And now you're going to have to compare the reason to the predicate.
There's no pervasion.
Well, you don't know because you don't know what right?
But it's definitely, there's no pervasion. That's
Oh,
no.
okay. Yeah, okay. Very nice. Sound on me. Yes, very nice. Good point. So the first step internally is to check, does the subject relate to the reason? If no, the reason is not established. If yes, now I have to check, does the reason relate to the predicate? But just so that we don't get complacent with things being too easy, the way that the subject is relating to the reason and the way that the reason is relating to the predicate are different. The subject is relating to the reason as a statement of quality, but the reason has to relate to the predicate as a statement of pervasion. That's why those concepts are important to understand. Right? Whether you remember what they're called or not doesn't matter, but the idea behind them.
Got
right?
it. Mm-hmm.
Because if I say, take the subject, like a tree. I see a tree out my window, so I'm not being very creative. Take the subject, a tree. It follows that it is a flora because it is a plant, right? So the first thing you do is say, okay, a tree, is it a plant? Yes. So now I have to look at plant and flora, F-L-O-R-A, right? Plant and flora. So now the question I have to ask myself is, the question I'm asking myself is not, is a plant flora? That's not the question, that's not relevant. The question I'm asking myself is it true that whatever is a plant necessarily also is flora? Or could there be an exception?
So then you say, I accept to that consequence?
If
wrong
you think that
consequence?
there is pervasion, then you say, I accept. But if you think, well, hold on a minute, it's not true, not all plants are flora, then you'd say there's no pervasion. Watch, ready? Take the subject, Poor Snoopy. He's been more talked about in here than, well, that's not true. Okay, take the subject Snoopy. It follows that he is a species because he is a dog. Okay, so let's think about that. So first of all, you'd have to think, okay, Snoopy.
There's no pervasion.
You are correct. You are correct. But here's how we get to that, right? The subject Snoopy, I'm saying the reason I'm saying is a dog. Is that true? Snoopy is a dog? Yes, that's true. So the reason is established, so I don't need to say anything about that. Now I have to check between dog and species. Notice, if I made the mistake, if I said, is dog a species? Then the answer would be yes. But that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is it true that whatever is a dog is necessarily a species? And there the answer is no, right? Great Dane is a dog, but it's not a species, it's a breed.
I actually got you the other way around, that Snoopy is not a species.
Well, that you don't have to think about because that's the conclusion, really. That's the conclusion that we're trying to get at, right? Here, let me.
You can't do it that way.
No. You can't do it that way.
You run into trouble.
Yeah. Like big trouble, in fact. Let me just show you this. Hold on. So. Oh, I messed up. Let me just hold on. The subject. A. It is B because it is C. Okay, so just to begin, sorry, just writing this. The subject A, it is B because it is C, right? This would be well, in syllogism, because I didn't say it follows, but anyway. So the first step.
Is there really a difference between a syllogism and a consequence?
Yes.
What is, that's another question.
Yeah, that's a little bit more advanced. I'm happy to talk about it, but I don't want to take up too much time right now. But for our practical purposes, all you need to know is if you say it follows that, then it's a consequence. If you don't say that, then it's a syllogism. But there's a difference. Hold on. Number one. Okay. So when I say, hold on, just make it slightly less distracting. When I say this syllogism, the subject A, it is B because it is C, the first thing for me to check, number one, is the first claim is the subject A, it is C. So if so, the reason is established, right? So I'm checking the subject blank, that the part that's set out as the subject, and comparing to what comes after because, right? I'm making a sentence out of that and checking whether that sentence is true.
And that's the quality.
That's the statement of quality, exactly. Because when I say the subject A, it is C, that's a statement of quality. Now the second step. One second.
Whatever is a sign or a reason has to be the predicate.
Exactly.
Otherwise, there's no pervasion.
Exactly. That's the second step. The second step it's connecting the sign, the reason, with the predicate. So in this case, it's saying whatever is C, necessarily it is B. And if so, there is pervasion. And if not, there isn't.
Can you, it seems like thinking about that chapter with the pervasions, there were 4 forms. So it seems like this is testing for specific types. I guess you might have said mutually inclusive or 3P in the right direction.
Yes, exactly. But you don't have to worry about that as long as you think about whatever is this is that. Like that's enough. That's enough. There's 2 ways that can be realized, that can be, actualized. If that statement is true, then just naturally, then either the 2 things are mutually inclusive or there's 3 possibilities in the right direction. So all you have to worry about is it true that whatever is this is necessarily that?
So when it says, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, please.
When you say a statement of pervasion, it's really a particular type of pervasion.
No, to make it more confusing. Like there's only one type of pervasion, really. Like if I'm saying that there's pervasion between this and that, that always means the same thing. It always means that whatever is this is necessarily that.
Ouch, okay.
Yeah.
More definitions.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, I owe so much to the Emperor's book. Like it helped me a lot way back, but in future, I'm not going to use that. It's I think it's like we're trying to do 3 things at the same time in that book. Like if we don't come from a background of Western logic, then we have to, like, it's never mind. Okay, so okay, so the subject A, it is B because it is C. Now we're talking about this at a high level, but I think it's helpful to realize that we do this all the time. It's just that we don't do it with a great deal of clarity. Like if you say, where's John? He went out. Why? He needed to get some milk, right? Well, you just had a syllogism there. The subject, John, it went out because it needed to get some milk, right? So now imagine if I said, where's John? He went out. Why? Because he's tired. You'd be left with a question, right? Like that doesn't explain it, right? You'd say, okay, I mean, I believe that John is tired, but how does that relate to him going out, right? So if you think about that, what we're saying, what that would have looked like is the subject, John, it is out because it is tired. And what you're saying is, okay, I believe that John is out, but what does out have to, I believe that John, is tired, but what does tired have to do with being out? Right? So like if you said, wait, what does that have to do with it? What you're saying is there's no pervasion. See what I'm saying? On the other hand, if I said, where's John? He went out. Why? Because he's a garbage collector. And you're like, wait a minute, John isn't a garbage collector. That's just not true, right? Then what you're saying is the subject, John, is not the reason you just gave me, a garbage collector, right? The reason is not established. You follow? Right? Where's John? So we're talking about John. He went out. Why? Because he's a garbage collector. Wait a minute, John isn't a garbage collector. The reason is not established. So let's try it again. Where is John? The subject, John. He went out. That's the predicate. Why? Because he's an accountant. And then you think about it and you say, John is an accountant, but that doesn't answer my question. There's no pervasion between being an accountant and going out. Some accountants might work from home.
Gus, is it not true then that when the reason is not established, that just basically means it's not true, whereas
Exactly.
when there's no pervasion, it just means it doesn't follow logically?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Mm.
That's exactly right. Some people have translated the answer, like some people have translated this answer as the reason isn't true. And some people have translated, other people have translated this answer as it doesn't follow.
Hmm.
Right? So you're absolutely right. I wouldn't use those translations because there are like issues with them, like when you kind of get going with it, but that's the idea. You definitely got the idea, right? Right? Yeah, just bearing in mind that also if you don't know whether the reason is true or not, this is why I prefer established rather than true, because if you don't know whether the reason is true or not, you'd still say the reason is not established, right? So that's why I like that translation better, because say the reason is not true, it sounds like you're saying something very definitive. Whereas if you say the reason is not established, like we haven't established that that's the case, right? So please establish it, right?
So, sorry,
No.
when you say the reason is not established, does it put the onus, the burden of proof on the challenger to establish it?
Excellent question. Not necessarily, right? Because the challenger then has an option. The challenger can either decide to take on the burden of proof and prove it to establish the reason, or the challenger can say, okay, then, so then you have to admit, then you have to agree to the opposite of that. You see, the challenger has that option, and then you can agree to the opposite of that, and then the debate can continue based on the opposite of that, if you see what I'm saying. And there's actually even one more thing that the challenger can do. Well, I mean, actually that would, so let's say, okay, let's do this, Clara. So let me say this to you. Take the subject, the space shuttle. It follows that it is because it is made of cheese.
The reason is not established.
Take the subject, the space shuttle. It follows that it is not made of cheese.
I accept.
Right? Perfect. Up until that's exactly what you have to do. So now I'm the challenger. I always have more options. So here's one option that I could say. The subject, the space shuttle, it is not made of cheese because
It's made of metal.
beautiful, perfect, exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So you see, I still put the burden of proof back on you.
Right.
I still have that option. I still have that ability. Right? And then like if I were being very technical about it, I would, based on what you just said, you said because it's made of metal. So I would say, take the subject, the space shuttle, it follows that it is made of metal.
I accept.
It follows that whatever is made of metal is necessarily not made of cheese.
I accept.
Perfect. Spot on. That's it. You see?
Hmm.
And the reason I go ahead and do that as the challenger afterwards is because your answer, because it's made of metal, implies those two things, right? So when like we went through it, basically I got you to admit that the subject, the space shuttle, it is not made of cheese. We got to that point, right? So then I said the subject, the space shuttle, it is not made of cheese because, right? So what I did is the subject, the space shuttle, it is not made of cheese because, and I'm asking you to provide the reason. And then you provided the reason, because it is made of metal. So now I'm kind of challenging you, I'm poking you to say, okay, so you're saying the subject, the space shuttle, it is made of metal. And you said yes. I'm saying, and you're saying whatever is made of metal is not made of cheese. You see what I'm doing? You see what I mean? just look at something real quick. So at some later point, this is just what I was looking up. At some later point, oh, and by the way, if there's interest, there is talk for us to extend our meetings beyond. Technically, next week is supposed to be our last one, but we're talking about continuing from there if folks are interested. But and then if so, then at some point, I can share with you guys this document that I compiled a while back about like all the possible like moves in debate, you know, like because there's a limited number, right? And so, but the only reason I'm not jumping to share it yet is because I think it could get a little confusing because there's some things that, you know, go beyond. So I was just kind of looking at it now just to see if it's premature, and I think it is just a little premature. But there's nothing like there's nothing that goes beyond what we're talking about, if that makes sense. There's just like nuances that we can add and so forth.
I have
Yes, Linda.
a question about the why. Is what I noticed when we were practicing. It seemed so if the challenger has a statement and then the defender says why. I mean, when I say why, I'm actually trying to figure out an answer or an explanation, but then it comes back as the opposite. And then I think it's just done, or I didn't, it was, anyway.
I know, I hear what you're saying. That's a really great question. And there's an answer to that. I'm trying to think how to explain the answer to that. In essence, you can think about it this way. There's two things that the defender is doing. Perhaps this is just off the top of my head. Okay, there's two things that the defender is doing. One thing is that the defender is providing a basis for debate. The basis for debate is always coming from the defender, right? Not from the challenger. The challenger isn't going to debate something that the defender hasn't agreed to. You know? So let's say if I say, take the subject, the moon, it follows that it's made of green cheese. And you say, why? You say, it follows that it's not made of green cheese. You say, I accept. I'm not going to just go on as if you had said that it was made of green cheese. The basis now is that you said that it's not. That's the ground on which we're debating. Do you understand what I mean, more or less, or not really? So I'll say more about that, but I'll just say, just to finish it, the second thing that the defender is doing is providing answers to consequences, right? So the defender is providing a basis for debate and answering consequences. So you can imagine that, like, just as like a starting point, you can have like an image of the defender being like a supremely serene person, because as you guys might know, like the defender sits down on the ground, you know, or on a cushion to respond, and the challenger is kind of like jumping around on their feet all over, going like that, you know. So the challenger is agitated, the defender is calm and peaceful, potentially, you know. And in fact, if the defender is doing like too good a job and the debate is going on and on and on, and other debaters have already finished, other debaters will jump in and start throwing other challenges at the defender who's still sitting there, right? It's so you can almost imagine like the image of like the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, you know, and Mara manifesting all of these, you know, obstacles all around, and the Buddha just calmly there, right? So the defender, in a sense, is saying, here's something that I believe, you know, And then the challenger, jumping all around them, is going to say, oh yeah, then what do you think about this? And the defender is basically just going to say, no, that's not a problem, you know. But no, it is a problem because blah, blah, blah. No, that's not true. You know, oh, well, but it is a problem because of that. Well, that's true, but that doesn't prove that it's a problem.
So really,
Yeah.
even though the challenger starts, it sounds like the defender could be the more grounded one, and the challenger can come up with anything and wing
Exactly.
it, as you said, and as
Exactly.
Andrew was gnawing on last week, I think.
Exactly. So for example, let me say, take the subject, a tomato, and I'm saying this to you, Linda. Take the subject, a tomato. It follows that it's a vegetable.
Well, shoot, Jana may have to give me input on that one.
Oh, sorry, that's right. We've already done it. Okay, but anyway, no. Just tell me, and this is the point, by the way. You don't have to be right. Just tell me what you think. And just to ease tensions, I'm picking a controversial example, so you don't have to be embarrassed if you
Okay,
wrong, so to speak.
so say it again.
Take the subject, a tomato. It follows that it's a vegetable.
Why?
It follows that it's not a vegetable.
Well, then I could probably say accept.
Then you'd have to say accept, right? Okay. It follows that it's an animal.
Why?
It follows that it's an animal because it is not a vegetable.
Okay, so then I need to compare.
You don't have to, don't worry about comparing any. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe you mean compare in a different sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Tomato, because it follows it's what? Because it's a.
It follows that it's an animal because it is not a vegetable.
Okay, so I agree that it's because it's not a vegetable. So I would say that there's no pervasion.
Brilliant. So you're spot on, right? So now I'm going to say it follows that there are things that are not vegetables, but are also not animals.
Agree.
Pause it. Give me an example of something that is not a vegetable and is also not an animal.
The car.
Okay.
I posit a car.
Take the subject, a car. It follows that it is not a vegetable.
Accept.
It follows that it is not an animal. An animal, right? It follows that it is not an animal.
Accept.
Brilliant. See, like that's you holding your own. So far, I haven't been able to shake up the fact that you said that a tomato is not a vegetable.
I think it takes a lot on the part of both parties to keep track of what, well, at least to me, even the previous statement, what the elements are and where we're at.
Yes.
I'd forgotten you were already comparing tomatoes and vegetables by the time you got to the
Yes.
sentence.
Couple of things about that. One thing about that is that when we're starting, we're trying to keep in mind, like, wait, what do I mean? Like, does it compare? Wait, how do I, like, and so you're doing a whole lot more work than I currently am, just because I've, learned this a few years back, you know what I mean? So over time, like when you're not doing that work anymore, you'll be able to focus just on what is it that we're talking about. So that will get a lot easier, if that makes sense.
In the meanwhile, I feel like you need a chalkboard or something. Like, okay, hang on, I'm gonna write these down.
Right. And then when we're learning, it's actually, I was kind of just jumping in and just going for it for the sake of speed and flow. But when we're learning, it can be helpful for me as the challenger to spell everything out every time, like to keep saying the subject, the subject, the subject, rather than just kind of say, okay, we've established a subject, now here's what follows. You see what I'm saying? But what I wanted to show, that what I wanted to demonstrate with that was how I, as the challenger, I can go anywhere. I like you didn't say anything about animals, but I said, then it's an animal, which of course it's not. But I'm just testing how confident you are. I'm testing how clear it is to you.
I have a question about that. As the challenger, as you said, there's lots of options where to go. But what is it that guides you as a challenger? What is your? I'm just wondering, where do we want the conversation to go? Because once we've established it's not a vegetable, it's a fruit or whatever, and I've accepted it. For me, like, I'm thinking, okay, that's the end of that debate. But then you come in with a different, what's the purpose of, and what guides the next step for the challenger? What's the real objective?
Excellent question. In Dan Perdue's book, there is a chapter on the strategies of debate, that talks a bit more about it. But anyway, but the way I'll answer your question is this. First of all, the very beginning of the debate, so the challenger always formally starts the debate. The challenger always formally starts the debate by flinging a consequence at the defender, like seemingly randomly, So maybe like informally, we already agreed in advance what we were going to debate about, but when the debate starts, then I fling a consequence at you, right? Then the defender is either going to accept that or reject that. But one way or the other, I, as the challenger, I'm going to get the defender to say it out loud, right? I'm going a little bit beyond what you asked, but I think it will. So let's say if I say, take the subject, the tomato, it follows that it's a vegetable. And the person says, I accept, right? The record shows that they accepted that a tomato is a vegetable, right? Hi, Sheila, welcome. On the other hand, if I say, take the subject, the tomato, it follows that it's a vegetable. And they say, why? I say, that's why I'm going to say, take the subject, the tomato. It follows that it is not a vegetable. And then if they say, I accept, okay, now the record shows that they are saying that a tomato is not a vegetable. Once we've established, so to speak, the first thing that the defender is accepting, that is what becomes called the root thesis, right? So just for the sake of simplicity, let's say that they accept that a tomato is a vegetable. Tomato is a vegetable. So now that's the root thesis. The root thesis is the subject, a tomato, it is a vegetable. That's the defender's root thesis.
That's
So,
helpful because as it goes into cars and bears or whatever,
exactly.
you could lose track.
Exactly. So now it becomes almost like a chess game, so to speak, like it's a chess game toward enlightenment. But my goal as the challenger now is to, the equivalent of like capturing the king, like my ultimate goal as the challenger is to get the defendant to say that they were wrong, that a tomato is not a vegetable after all, right? So if at some point I can say it follows that a tomato is not a vegetable, and they say, I accept, they lost. And then I'd say, sa, right? Because you have just denied your root thesis that this debate is over, right? The only other way that the debate could end is if I, as the challenger, basically say, you know what? Well done. I got nothing, like I got nothing left that I can think to throw at you, and that can happen through different kinds of reasons, but that's the essence of it. And then if that happens, there's nothing that you say, but Dan Perdue say, you can say, Happy New Year, may the gods be victorious, because we as Westerners, we want symmetry. We're like, but we need something to say in that case too, right? So, okay, so that's number one. So now the question becomes, well, how do we get from point A to point B? How do we get from the establishing of the root thesis to them now rejecting the root thesis, right? And the actual answer, and it took me years for this penny to drop, because the actual answer is that you can get there however you want, you as the challenger, you don't even have to be like super fair, so to speak. Like you can use like sleight of hand a little bit and so forth. Why? Not because not because like you want to win or you're going to trick them or so forth, but because you want them to get to that place where they're solid in their understanding, where there's no doubt anymore, you know? So if let's say I said, let's do this, Clara. Take the subject, a piece of Swiss cheese, okay? Take the subject, a piece of Swiss cheese. It follows that the more holes it has, the less of it there is. Or I'll even make it simpler. It follows that the more holes it has, the less cheese there is.
I accept.
It follows that the more of it you have, the more holes you'll have.
I accept.
It follows that the more of it you have, the less cheese you'll have.
There's no pervasion.
I didn't say a reason.
Oh. Why?
Why? It follows that the more of it you have, the less cheese you'll have, because the more of it you have, the more holes you'll have.
There's no pervasion.
You are correct. You are correct. But I was trying to trick you, right? You see? You see?
Right.
There's a trick there. But why am I doing that? Not because I want to convince you that the more cheese you have, the less cheese you have, but because I want you to be very clear, very sharp, like where you're not going like, wait, hold on, wait a minute. I'm helping you, you know, by playing devil's advocate, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Now, so basically, as the challenger, if your root thesis is correct, then my job, well, let me say, if your root thesis is incorrect, if your root thesis is wrong, and I know it and I can see why, then my job is to help you get there, you know, like honestly. But if your root thesis is correct, then my job is to play devil's advocate any way I can. It's like, what might throw somebody off? What might make somebody be unclear about that? Let me throw that at them and help them, right? So there's lots of traditional, I'm told, I've never witnessed this, but I'm told there's lots of traditional little like teasing sentences that have become part of like the Tibetan debate tradition, you know? So like there's something that you say if the person's taking too long to answer, you know, there's like different things you say, but one that I like is like if the person, if like you confuse the defender to the point where now they're like they don't know how to get out of that knot, then you say, it's a good thing Dharmakirti was smarter than you, otherwise there would be no Buddhists left. Right? So it's always like, it's a cute little thing you say to say like, don't worry, there's a mistake, just like keep thinking about it, you know? Okay, so now to finally get more direct answer to your question, if the person's root thesis is incorrect, then where do you go from there? Basically, you as the challenger, you think, how do I know that that's wrong? Right? And that will kind of inform where you go. So if the person accepts that how can I think? Let me see if I can think of a better example. Let's say I come to you to begin with and I say, it follows, like I'm the challenger, I'm starting the debate. It follows that whatever is an animal is necessarily a cat. And let's say that for Lord knows what reason you say, I accept. Okay, so now that's the root thesis. The root thesis that you've accepted is that whatever is an animal is necessarily a cat, right? Well, I know that that's wrong. How do I know that that's wrong? Right, well, because I can think of other animals that aren't cats. So how will I get you to see that is I'll throw a consequence at you. So I'll say, take the subject, a giraffe. It follows that it is a cat. And if you say, why? I'll say, it follows that it is a cat because it is an animal. Do you understand what I'm saying or no? Yeah, you see what I'm saying? And then you'll say, then if you get it, you'll say there's no pervasion. Say, it follows that whatever is an animal is not necessarily a cat. And then you'll say, I accept, and I'll say, tsat, tsat. And that would be a 3-second debate. Alternatively, you might be so confused that when I say the subject giraffe is a cat, you might say, I accept. And you think that a giraffe is a cat. Now, I know that a giraffe isn't a cat. So now that my job becomes to show you that. So how do I know that a giraffe isn't a cat? You know, so, and this is fascinating, right? Because I, as the challenger, I'm learning too, because I have to think, how do I know that a giraffe isn't a cat, right? So the first thing that comes to mind for me, right, is that, well, for one thing, it's not a feline. I don't know. So that's me personally, that's what I would say. I would say, take the subject, a giraffe. It follows that it is not a cat because it is not a feline. Right? And let's say you could accept, let's say you said the reason is not established. I'd say take the subject, a giraffe. It follows that it is a feline. Right? And then you'd accept. And then personally at that point, I'm just saying, like, in my mind, in that point specifically, I would think, okay, clearly the two of us have different understandings of what a feline is. So my thought would be, let me see if I can understand her understanding of what a feline is. So then I would say, it follows that you can posit a definition of feline. You see what I'm saying? Like that, like, you know, in that specific case, like we did kind of get to the end of our rope, but so in other words, I'm always going back, and I'm always, as the challenger, I'm always asking, like, how do I know that that's wrong? How do I know that that's wrong? If it's wrong, if I think it's wrong. And then my consequence will stem from the answer to that. You know, like, I'll show you, like, well, this is absurd, because if what you're saying is true, then this would follow. Right? Except I'm not saying it's absurd. I'm letting you figure that out for yourself. I just want to say what you do if you think that they're right, but Jana?
Well, Andrew sent us this wonderful video of a debate. And in that debate, the challenger was telling the defender, now positive definition for X or Y or whatever. So at what point does the challenger say positive definition?
Whenever they want, whenever they want. You know, whenever it would be helpful to them. So, for one thing, like, just to drive this home, this could be like the beginning of a debate. Like, I could begin a debate by saying, posit a definition of chair, and then you'd say something that you sit on, and say, take the subject chair. It follows that its definition is something you sit on. If you say I accept, that's our root thesis. Right? So I'm trying to prove to you that the definition of chair is not something you sit on, right? Alternatively, if we're talking back and forth and we get to a point where, like we did, like, let's, like, in the hypothesis, like, you know, that somebody accepts that a giraffe is a feline, you know, then it becomes clear to me, and this isn't something I've read anywhere, just to be transparent about that. I'm just kind of telling you, like, my own operation. Like, it becomes clear to me that we're not understanding those words the same way. Like, one of us is thinking about feline as meaning one thing, and one of us is thinking of feline as meaning something else. And frankly, if I said posit the definition of a feline, and what the person said turned out to be what I think of as a feline, then my next thought would be like, well, then posit the definition of giraffe. Right? And really, by doing that, ultimately, either I would be able to find the mistake and show it to them, or they'd convince me that I've been wrong. I as the challenger, really. You know, and then finally, at a certain point, I'd say the gods are victorious, you know. That wouldn't happen, of course, in the case of a giraffe, but now that's kind of the process if what the person is saying is incorrect. If what the person is saying is correct, then what you want to do is you want to, and this requires creativity, and we get like certainly better and better at this with time, right? But we try to think of, like, what would be like a confusing example of that? We're not being malicious, you know, like, because we are very solid when we can see things through, even in the confusing examples, you know? So, like, let's say that, I don't know, we're debating about the number pi, you know? I say, take the subject pi, it follows that it is a number. And you say, I accept. Okay, that's, let's say now a root thesis. Pi is a number, right? Now that's true. But so my job as the challenger now isn't to prove you wrong. It's to, like, you know, help bolster your understanding by making sure that you won't later kind of think like, wait, maybe was I wrong? Because in light of some new information, right? So like, still my goal, so to speak, in terms of the debate still is to get you to deny your root thesis and to say the subject pi is not a number. Like, I'm still going to try to get you to say that, but like, in my heart of hearts, I hope that you won't. I hope that I'll lose, if you get what I'm saying, right? Because you were right, that pi is a number. So I might say something like, take the subject pi, it follows that it is either odd or even, right? That's not true, but like, off the top of my personal head, like, I can see how somebody could get thrown off by that. Or I might even just come at you from a totally different angle and say, it follows that whatever is a number necessarily can be written down in like Arabic numerals. And you might say, okay, I accept. And we'd say, it follows that the subject pi, take the subject pi, it follows that it can be written down in Arabic numerals. And now we're getting into interesting territory. Because if you say no, then you've just learned something new. But if you say yes, I can say it follows that it can't be written down in Arabic numerals, because if somebody started writing today, by the time of the heat death of the universe, they wouldn't have finished yet. You see what I'm saying? And then what happens, and again, this is the part where it's really hard at first because we're processing so many things at the same time. But ultimately, what's going to happen is that I, as the challenger, you know, each of these things that each of these like consequences that I'm putting out there is like it's like bait, you know, like to see if I catch you in your mistake, right? And so if you make a mistake at some point, if you bite the bait by making a mistake, then that's a new branch of the debate. Once we get to the end of the branch of the debate, once I show you the mistake in that branch, then I work backwards through the branch to the main trunk again. So like this, it's hard to give an example of this live because it requires the person making a series of mistakes, and I can't rely on somebody making a series of mistakes, you know. But let's say, just think of something that could be manageable. I'm thinking like, is a hot dog a sandwich? But I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody knows. So not that. Let's say that somebody said, let's say that I came and said, posit the definition between the two, Buddha and Arhat. Buddha and Arhat. In fact, Linda, I saw you looking pensive. That was your mistake. So I thought, oh, wait, maybe she doesn't know off the top of her head. So, hey, Linda, posit how do the two compare, Buddha and Arhat?
So how did they do to compare?
Uh-huh.
So I would say, okay. Let me just take a moment to look at these pervasions here, or the,
Yes, yes.
well, so my reasoning is that I believe
Da, 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 da. Don't tell me.
I can't get through.
Just have to say one of the options. It's okay if you're wrong. Don't worry.
Okay, so this is
I hope you're wrong. Otherwise, this example won't work.
so you're asking me a comparison. Will
Mhm.
you state it again?
Sure. Pause it. How do the two compare? Buddha and Arhat.
Okay, I posit that there are three possibilities between Buddha and Arhat.
Drat.
Okay, you want me to make something up?
Make something up.
I
Thank you.
posit that they're mutually exclusive.
Mutually exclusive. Thank you so much. I appreciate
I'll
this.
work on being inaccurate here.
Yes, yes, yes. Try to get this wrong a little bit. Okay. So now we have the root thesis. So I would say it follows that the two, Buddha and Arhat, are mutually exclusive.
Except.
Right? Okay, so now we have our thesis. Now my goal is to show the mistake in that. And there is a mistake in that. So I would just to talk, I would say false that they're not mutually exclusive. Then I launch into it. And I would say something like, it follows that whatever is a Buddha is necessarily not an Arhat.
Except.
You'd have to, right? Okay.
Mhm.
Then I'd say, I mean, I like that. That's the thing. I can go anywhere, but let me say, posit the definition of Arhat.
Posit that an Arhat is one who has realized emptiness.
Okay.
Oh,
Good.
shoot, I guess I got to be wrong. Okay, well, I
Good.
don't even know if that might be wrong. I'm
You
not
were
exactly.
wrong. Good job of pretending to be wrong.
Okay. Oh, yes, intentional.
So I'd say, okay, so it follows that, take the subject, Arhat, it follows that its definition is a being who has realized emptiness.
Well, I have to accept that,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
It follows that whatever is a being that has realized emptiness necessarily is an Arhat.
So I guess I would probably normally accept that based on my premise.
Exactly, right? So that follows from what you said. So
Mhm.
again, what I just said is whatever is a being that has realized emptiness is necessarily an Arhat, right? It follows that, take the subject, a being on the path of seeing,
Oh, no.
it follows that it is an Arhat because it is a being that has realized emptiness.
Well,
So maybe you don't know what the path of seeing means exactly.
reason not established.
The reason is not established. Great. Okay. Take the subject, a being on the path of seeing, it follows that it is a being who has realized emptiness because it is defined as a being who has realized emptiness but has not yet reached the path of meditation. So you can
So-
go ahead, if you don't mind, just accepting this one. for me.
Accept.
Okay. Okay. So then I would say it follows that the subject, a being in the path of seeing, it is a being who has realized emptiness.
Accept.
So then I'd say sa, meaning I'm just marking for you that you just said something different from what you had said before.
Like a checkpoint. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. So and now I'm going to work back and I'd say, take the subject, a being in the path of seeing, it follows that it is an Arhat because it has realized emptiness.
Which is back to the original, except my wrong. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So if you so you accept that, let's say.
Mhm.
Take the subject of being in the path of seeing, it follows that it is not an arhat because it has not yet reached a path of no more learning.
Say that again.
The subject of being who has being on the path of seeing, it is not an arhat because it is not a being who has reached a path of no more learning.
I think that contradicts. I'm not sure, but I think that contradicts what you said earlier. So
It absolutely does. I'm allowed to contradict myself left and right.
ah,
All you have to do is all you as the defender have to do is listen to the last thing I said and say what your answer to that is.
okay. And I
So
think it,
vacuum.
pardon?
So like in a vacuum, I'm saying to you, take the subject of being in the path of seeing, it follows that it is not an arhat because it is not a being who has achieved the path of no more learning.
So I think it'd probably take me 10 minutes to work that out, but I think I may need to accept that
Fine.
logically.
So then I'd say, take the subject of being in the path of seeing, it follows that it is not an arhat.
Can someone else continue? I think my head's ready to
You're
explode.
doing great.
Help.
Does anybody else want to try that? Just continuing from there. Okay, Andrew, I see you volunteering secretly.
Thanks.
Oh, geez.
So
Yeah.
I'm just going to continue from there. Take the subject of being on the path of seeing, it follows that it is not an arhat.
I accept.
Sa, I'm pretending that you're the same person. So
Mm.
sa, take the subject of being on the path of seeing, it follows that it is a being who has realized emptiness, but is not an arhat.
That's it. Repeat again, sorry.
Absolutely. Take the subject of being on the path of seeing, it follows that it is a being who has realized emptiness, but is not an arhat.
Oh, so it is the being realized emptiness, but not an arhat. I accept.
Brilliant. So it follows that it is a being who has, so tsa. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No tsa. You never out loud said the opposite of that. So no tsa. Even if it was implicit, you didn't say it. So now I'll say, it follows that there is such a thing as a being who has realized emptiness, but is not an arhat.
Accept.
Brilliant. So now I'm going to say, it follows that it is not the case that whatever is a being who has realized emptiness is necessarily an arhat.
I accept.
Sa. It follows, take the subject, arhat, it follows that its definition is not a being who has realized emptiness.
I accept.
Sa. Right? So now, so if you think about what we did, remember our root thesis? Probably not, right?
That's I mean, to be blunt,
yes.
I can't. Like,
Yeah.
you
yeah.
just ta. I mean, I'm going, I
Yes.
don't know.
I get that. I totally get that.
What have I learned from that?
So hold on to that for a second. So our root thesis was that the two Buddha and Arhat are mutually exclusive, right? So in order to start to get at that, I asked, what's the definition of Arhat? And you posited a being who has realized emptiness. So before the debate can proceed, I need to show you, whoa, that's not even what we're talking about, right? So what I did is I showed you the consequences that would follow if that were the definition. And then finally you got to a place where you said, oh yeah, never mind, sorry, that's not true. Sa. Then I gave you the previous thing you had said. And you said, no, that's not true either. Sa. Previous thing you had said, that's not true either. Sa. And we made our way back to this first branching off point of the definition of an arhat. So I've shown you that your first thought of what the definition of an arhat was is that it's somebody who's realized emptiness. I've shown you that's not it, right? That's not it. So now what I would do is I would say again, then what is the definition of an arhat? You see what I'm saying?
I think
And then
so.
if you really didn't know, if you said something like, I don't know, I would say, take the subject arhat. It follows that its definition is a being who has attained liberation from samsara. You see? And let's just say you accepted. So good, now we've defined arhat. Now, this is again, this is the path I'm choosing to take in this debate. So now what I would do is I would say, well, then posit the definition of Buddha. And through a similar process, we'd have the definition of arhat, we'd have the definition of Buddha. And then on the basis of that, I'd have everything I need to show you that they're not mutually exclusive.
Can I ask a question about, the definition of arhat, for
Isn't
example?
this completely clear already? Yes.
What's that?
I just made a joke. Yes.
I was just wondering, I mean, this doesn't work unless one of the two people has recourse to the true definition, right? I mean, we know it or we don't.
I'll tell you this
particular definition. So do we need to, someone needs to have kind of an authoritative recourse to what's the official definition?
Very, very good question. Until like a month and a half ago, if you had asked me this question, I would have said, yes, that's right. And in fact, the way debates typically go in the Tibetan tradition is first you all study the definitions together. And then on the basis of that, you go out to debate, right? But you didn't ask me a month ago. You asked me today. If you ask me today, I'll tell you, I've come to realize that that's not true. That's not true. You don't have to have the correct definition. All you really need for this to work is you need to come to a common definition between the two of you. As long as you're speaking the same language, this will work, right? Now, if you do it that, like, either if you have the official definition, then you have the official definition. If you don't, and you're using kind of a definition between you, then you just have to be mindful that whatever conclusions you come to won't necessarily follow if somebody else is using a different definition. So like you can come to something within the context of this, but it doesn't mean that like the texts will agree with you because you don't know what's the definition that the texts are using. But if you wanted to, so like if I said to you, it follows that you can posit take the subject arhat, it follows that you can posit its definition according to the Jetsun textbook of Setaje Monastery, right? Then if we wanted to debate about that, then we'd have to go check the text, which is as it should be.
Right.
Right? Because otherwise we're making things up.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very complicated answer to a very simple question. Let me put it this way. The bottom line is, if you're trying to debate to get an understanding of something that goes beyond this conversation, then yeah, figure out like what does that word mean so that we're using it correctly, right? But I guess what maybe the insight here is more that sometimes once you ask the person to posit the definition, you can show them that they're wrong, even without having to cite another definition that you know. So like, for example, let me give you an example. Like here's a real life example. I don't know what the definition of a trapezoid is. I don't know, right? But let's say that I could still say posit the definition of trapezoid, and you said it's a two-dimensional figure. I could still say take the subject a circle. It follows that it's a trapezoid because it's a two-dimensional figure. And you say, okay, never mind, that's not the definition. See what I mean? I feel like I made things worse with my answer to your question. But so let me put it this way. So let me say the upshot is this: if you can easily access the definition, the official definition, do it. You know, but if you're out of cell phone service, I mean, what a remarkable age this is, isn't it? Like if you don't have cell phone service, then just see how far you can get between the two of you, and then you can say, now let's, after we're done, it's like when we get home, let's check what the actual definition is. Meaning, if you don't know the definition, it doesn't mean you have to stop the debate necessarily.
But you need to come to a consensus
Yes, you need to come
between the two of you, even if that's the wrong definition, but there is a consensus within the debate.
Exactly, because the essence of this, I guess, of this answer is that words are just conventions, you know. So if we're debating whether, you know, Santa Claus exists or not, and what you think Santa Claus means is like, you know, a man over the age of 70. But when I understand that's what you mean, then okay, fine, yeah. So in that sense, yeah, Santa Claus does exist. But then, just to be clear, I might say, now take the subject, a man who lives on the North Pole and uses flying reindeer to pull his sleigh. It follows that does not exist. And if you agree with that, then we're in agreement. We're just using words differently. Do you see what I mean? Now, if I wanted to do you an extra service, I could say, take the subject Santa Claus. It follows that a man over the age of 70 is not the definition that other people use. And then I could prove that to you. How could I prove that to you? Well, how do I know? And then I debate it that way. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think for once in my life, I might be talking too much. I think it might be more helpful for us to try this a little bit more. Let me just answer really quickly the other questions because I don't want to leave people hanging. Let me start with the easy one. We used mind versus brain as mutually exclusive. Should this have been matter versus consciousness as per the text? No, it can be whatever you want. It can be whatever you want. And in fact, if you're asking in point of fact, are mind and brain mutually exclusive? Well, I'm not going to tell you that. That would vitiate the whole process, wouldn't it? Figure it out. Proving mutually exclusive, won't there always be the possibility of an example out there that disproves? We don't know what we don't know. That's an excellent question. And what this points out is that you can only posit that things are mutually exclusive if it logically follows that they would be mutually exclusive. You can't just posit the two things are mutually exclusive just on the basis that nobody's ever seen something that's both of them. So, like, take the subject, the two, a swan, and a bird whose feathers are pink. Right? I personally wouldn't feel comfortable proving that they're mutually exclusive because who knows, but maybe we just haven't found the pink swan. Right? But if you say, take the subject, a square and a triangle, but in Euclidean geometry, then I would definitely say those are mutually exclusive for sure. We can logically prove that. Take the subject, a thing, and that thing's cause. Those are definitely mutually exclusive. We can logically prove that. Right? The definition of cause, which is something that had to precede the thing, among other things. Yes. So let's do this. let's take a few minutes for me to send you guys out into breakout rooms, to give you an opportunity to try this out. And let me think how do I want to do this? Am I what we've been talking about? How about we debate? So, the challenger starts by asking the defender, how do the two compare, organic and living? Have we already done that? We have organic and living? No? Okay. Well, even if we have, actually, we can just do it again, right? And don't worry, like, even if one of you guys happens to be like an organic chemist or something like that, like, don't worry. It's go through the debate, see what comes up. Like, don't jump out of it and say, no, that's incorrect because blah 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 blah. Do it all through means of the debate. Okay, and then we'll come back and talk about how it goes and what questions come up. So again, unless you happen to have prior knowledge, you're going to use your own understanding of what those words mean, right? And we'll see how that goes. Okay, so let me open up some breakout rooms. Let's see, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait, sorry. I'm having math problems.
3 without you.
Sorry?
3 without you, if there's 2 in the room.
Right. No, but I think, hold on, let me see what happens. Hold on. Sorry guys. Add room. Okay. Oh, and let me just set a timer. Okay. All right. Hi. Okay, let's do it. Would you like to be the challenger or the defender? Oh, and oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I reckon I'm better as a defender because I just can't think quick enough.
That's all right. That's all right.
And I get lost really quickly.
No worries. No worries. That's the nature of it. Like, that's the only way. That's the only way. So as like an encouraging reminder, you remember you only have to pay attention to basically the last thing I said, like just like the last thing I said, and just think, what is my actual answer to that? Right? Okay, so let's try it. So let's start. So posit the definition, so not the definition, what are we saying? How do the two compare? Organic and living.
So I think there are 4 possibilities.
Okay. So I'm just to taunt you, I'm gonna say false, that there are not 4 possibilities between organic and living. So because you said there are 4 possibilities, well, I'll leave the explanations out. I'll just do it. So posit something that is both organic and living.
A carrot that is currently growing.
Take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing. It follows that it is organic.
I accept.
It follows that it is living.
I accept.
The subject, a carrot that is currently growing, is organic because
It is naturally growing.
it is naturally growing. It follows that a carrot that is currently living is naturally growing.
Why?
It follows that a carrot that is currently living is not naturally growing.
I know the answer, so I only can say I accept, but I want to get that nuance, don't I? Because you said that.
Let's see what happens if we're very strict about it, right? So take the subject of carrot that is currently living. It follows that it is not growing, that it is carrot that is currently. Oh, so now I got lost. A carrot that is currently. Well, let me take a step back. Take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, right? That's the subject. It follows that it is organic because
it is growing naturally.
Because it is growing naturally. So take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it is growing naturally.
Why?
Take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it follows that it is not growing naturally.
Take the subject, carrot that is naturally growing. Sorry, can you repeat that? I need to write it down.
Take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing.
Yeah.
It follows that it is not growing naturally.
Why?
It follows that it is growing naturally.
I want to say why again, but I know I can't.
Huh? Do you know what your mistake is? I'm reading your mind. I think I know what your mistake is. You're thinking of it as a statement of pervasion when it's a statement of quality. I'm not saying whatever is a carrot that is currently growing necessarily is a carrot that is growing naturally. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it follows that it is growing naturally. And I would say, just to help you out, I would say that the answer to that is why. I would say that it is not growing naturally. Right? Meaning, like, if I say, give me a subject give me an example of something that is growing naturally, I don't think it would be enough to say a carrot that is currently growing. I don't think that would be an example of that. That leaves too much up in the air, right? So then in the terminology that we use here, we say, okay, then a carrot that is currently growing, it's not a carrot that is growing naturally, meaning it's not like it doesn't exemplify that.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? That's not saying that every carrot that is currently growing is necessarily not growing naturally. It's not saying that.
Yeah, I
Yeah?
think.
So let's say.
Do you find it with this? Because are there people that do this and it's very much that it's a written thing for them? Because I think if I were to see all this in writing, which is the way I've approached the other videos we've watched, if I can see it in writing and I can follow it and I can think about it, hearing the words, I just struggle to think.
I think what you're saying is I think is very normal. I think it's very normal. Because I didn't at the time have anybody else that I knew who I could even talk about this with, I learned it all in writing myself, so I can tell you that I think it works, in that sense, like it will get us there. And we definitely eventually need to break out of that, you know? Well, I mean, I guess if I say it that way, like, I mean, it depends what our purpose is, right? But it can be very helpful to break out of that. And I know that in Tibet, they don't do it that way. So
Yeah.
my instinct is to say, like, my instinct would be to say, let me try to push through, you know, and see what happens. Eventually it will click.
Okay.
But so to come back to this, right? When I said, when I asked for an example of something that is both organic and living,
Yep.
you said a carrot that is currently growing.
Correct.
So I said, take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it follows that it is organic, right? Because you just gave it as an example of something.
Yeah.
So you said you accept. So then I said, take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it is organic because, and you said,
It is naturally growing.
as it is naturally growing. So in saying that, you're making the claim that a carrot that is currently growing is naturally growing.
Oh, because of the because.
Mm-hmm. Think about it this way.
It is currently growing. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Think about it this way. Imagine that when I said, take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it is organic because you didn't say, because it is an organic tomato. Why didn't you say that?
Because it's not a tomato.
Right. Right. You also didn't say that because it is a piece of lettuce. Why didn't you say that?
Because it's not a piece of lettuce.
You did say that it's because it's a carrot that is growing naturally. Why did you say that?
Because in my mind, the word naturally.
No. Sorry, just very simply, because in your mind, at least, it is a carrot that is growing naturally.
Yeah.
That's what you were envisioning.
Yeah.
You know, like, so in other words, so you are, like, when you give that as a reason, you're positing that this reason applies. You're positing that this reason is true. So you're positing that a carrot that is currently growing is a carrot that is growing naturally.
Okay. I
Do you
think
see
that's
what I'm saying? But so then my job becomes to spell that out for you and say, based on what you just said, take the subject, the carrot that is currently growing, it follows that it is growing naturally. And that's when you might say, oh crap, perhaps. Or you might say, no, it is.
Yeah. So at that point, I would say, oh crap, that's not what I meant. So I would say, why?
Perfect. And so I would say that subject, a carrot that is currently growing, it follows that it is not growing natural, carrot that is growing naturally.
I would say, accept.
Perfect. So now I would say, so now what I would do then is I would say, it follows that I think in light of the way this played out, I would just go ahead and say this. Then take us the subject, a carrot that is currently growing. It follows that it is organic because
it is growing naturally without any chemicals being added.
Okay, so take the subject, a carrot that is currently growing. It follows that it is growing naturally without any chemicals being added.
Yeah, I've just done the same mistake again, haven't I?
Right. You see, yeah. And again, please don't be embarrassed. This is absolutely the way it goes. Like, this, southern neurons get rewired, right? So when I ask you for a reason, you're looking for something that you would be comfortable saying, yeah, that is true, you know? But maybe what you're getting at is that a carrot that is currently growing is not organic. It's not a good example of something organic.
Okay.
You see what I mean? In other words, maybe like where we went off the rail was when you posited that as an example of something that is organic.
That is both organic and living.
Uh-huh. So now see what happens if let's just go back. So you said there's 4 possibilities, organic and living. So posit something that is both organic and living. See what happens now if you say a subject, a carrot that is currently growing naturally without any chemicals being added to it.
So yeah, so something that is both organic and living is a carrot that is growing without any chemicals being added.
Beautiful.
Assisted in growing.
Beautiful. So take the subject, a carrot that is growing without, sorry, the time is going to be up in a minute. Take the subject, a carrot that is growing without any chemicals being added. It follows that it is organic.
I accept.
It is organic because
it is growing without any chemicals being added.
there you go. It follows that whatever is growing without any chemicals being added is necessarily organic.
I accept.
There you go. Right? I mean, whether I really agree or not, whether I think you're right or wrong, you see how that time it worked. Right? Because you picked an example that you could comfortably say is an example of that. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for that. That was
Thank you.
That was good. Let me just change my view. Okay. Welcome back. So what's the answer? What about, were there any questions?
A few.
Shoot.
Well, we followed the 3P narrative. And one example was a carrot, was formerly a living thing, but was not currently living. But then Sheila came up with a question about, well, if you put a carrot in, go ahead, Sheila.
Oh, you're muted.
So she used the example of a carrot as something that was organic but wasn't living. But then I thought, when you get a carrot home, you can stick it in water and and grow a plant from it. So it's still living.
Okay, so here's what we would do. Ready? Linda, so give me an example of something that is organic but is not living. Say a carrot.
A carrot.
Okay. Take the subject, a carrot. It follows that it is organic.
Accept.
Take the subject, a carrot. It follows that it is not living.
Accept, since that's.
Take the subject, a carrot. It follows that it is living, because when you bring it home, if you stick it in water, is it, or earth, or whatever, it will grow.
I have no idea how to respond to that.
Right?
Okay, so I would say there's one of those statements, right? The because. Reason not established.
The reason is not established. So then I would say, take the subject, a carrot. It follows that if you bring it home and stick it in earth, it will not grow.
Accept.
Okay.
Because that's my premise.
Absolutely. So that's the direction that the debate would take. That's how you would take that insight, Sheila, and put it into the debate. You see, you would fling it as a consequence, right? Now, Linda has made a new claim. Linda has claimed that a carrot taken home and put in earth will not grow.
With my gardening skills, I think that's true. But anyway.
Well said. I can relate to that. But But so Gus, I don't know the answer to that, but you, Sheila, might, you know? So if you think that she's wrong, then you have to think, how do I prove to her that she's wrong? You know? You see what I'm saying? And
So you just keep asking her questions to try to get her to admit or defend or.
let me ask you this, Sheila. Have you ever done the experiment? Have you planted a carrot that you brought home and it continued to grow?
Well, if you take a carrot, I mean, you take a lot of vegetables, you cut them off and you can stick them in water, you know, you cut up the bottom of the carrot and like the green shoots and you stick that in water and then new roots grow down.
This is what I would say. Take the subject carrot. It follows that if you take it home and put it in water, it will grow, because if you cut it in half and put it in water, new roots will grow down. You see what I'm saying? So I'm kind of explaining, this is how I know. This is how I know. Now, Linda might still not know that, as I just didn't. So if Linda doesn't know that, she might still say the reason is not established, you know? So then you could say something like, this is what, I mean, you can be as creative as you like, but here's what I might say. Take the subject, a carrot, it follows that it doesn't do what I just said, okay? It follows that it doesn't do what I just said because, so now I'm asking, how do you know? How do you know that it doesn't do that? You follow what I'm saying?
So how would you put that in the format of this conversation?
So Linda, take the subject, a carrot. It follows that if you bring it home and put it in water, it will grow, because if you take it home and cut it in half and put it in water, it will grow new roots. Are you Googling it? What would you say to that, Linda? That if you, like, it follows that if you bring it home, it will grow, because if you bring it home and cut it in half and stick it in water, it will grow new roots.
I would say the reason's still not established.
Good, yeah. That's probably what you should say, I'm thinking. So then I might say something. So here's the difficulty. The difficulty is that I, as Gus, couldn't continue this debate, right? Because I don't have the information that Sheila has. But just to demonstrate to Sheila how I would do it, if let's say I knew that, right? Then I would say, take the subject, a carrot. It follows that if you bring it home, cut it in half, put it in water, it will grow new roots, because it has been the experience of myself and many others that if you bring it home, cut it in half, put it in water, it will grow new roots, right? Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Well-
What I'm saying is, I think you would say to that, the reason is not established, meaning you don't know that, right?
Would it also come back to the definition of living?
Well, hold on. Don't ask me that just yet. One second.
Okay.
Just to finish up this point. So if you said the reason is not established, I would say it follows that, take a subject carrot, it follows that it has been the experience of many people that if you bring it home, cut it in half and put it in water, it will grow new roots, because you can ask many people whether they've done it, and they'll tell you that they've done it, you know? And then you can't.
As a reason? You can use that as a reason?
You can use it as a reason. You can use anything as a reason. Whether it's a valid reason or not, it's a totally different question, right? But at a certain point, you can even say, take the subject, you know, earlier you could have said, like, take the subject, a carrot. It follows that if you cut it and stick it in water, it will grow roots, because you can observe for yourself. If you buy a carrot, cut it in half, put it in water, it will grow roots, right? Now, the person doesn't know that yet, but remember, the point of the debate is to help them to get something new. right? So then the person will say, okay, I'll have to try it. See what I mean? Meanwhile, if you still want to prove to them that a carrot is living, you might be able to do it another way. You might be able to kind of go back to the top and give a different reason instead. Linda?
Well, I was just thinking about Clara's earlier comment about needing an expert or some sort of authoritative voice, is that it seems like at least a couple of tenet sub-schools split on this, right? I mean, some go by reasoning, some go by scriptures or sort of general agreement.
I think it's more complicated than that.
It is more complicated. I am sure it's more complicated, but I think it's an ongoing question: is how far can you reason based on an agreement of premise if neither party knows what's actually accurate?
Well, here, let me give you a real life example. Yesterday, my husband and I were out at a shopping center, and there was music playing, and I forget exactly what started, but let's say he said something like, let's say I said like, oh, what kind of rock is this? And he said, this isn't rock. I said, it's not rock? He said, yeah, it's not rock. And now he knows more about music than I do, right? So just the way this played out, and he said, how can you tell that it's not rock? And he said, oh, I can just tell. Right? He said, I can just tell. And he said, and so we went into it because he recently started learning Tibetan debate. So it was fun. So I said, like, you can posit a definition of rock in the context of music. Right? And so for a long while after that, we were kind of having fun figuring that out, because whenever he gave me a definition, I would say, okay, then it follows that. So part of the definition, he said, I hope you wouldn't mind my sharing this, but he said, part of it is that your parents wouldn't want you to listen to it when it first came out. Right? And I said, it follows that, take the subject, so I said, take the subject, a song that you're hearing for the first time on the radio now, that you don't know anything else about that song when it was released or who the artists are or anything like that. Take the subject, that song. It follows that you can't tell whether or not it's rock, because you can't tell whether or not your parents wouldn't have wanted you to listen to it when it first came out. And so he said, okay, no, you're right. So he had to say, okay, that's not what it is. And he said, it's something in the music. He said, okay. So it follows that there's something in the music that you can hear and tell whether it's rock or not. Do you see what I'm saying? We didn't need to go to an encyclopedia, because what we were doing is we were trying to help him understand how he knows whether something is rock or not. We don't need to consult an expert for that. Now, we could, like in theory, we could have gone through all of that, and we could have arrived at like a rock solid definition that he would feel totally comfortable with. Say, definitely, this is the definition. Anything that fits this definition is rock. Anything that does not is not rock, definitely. Right? It doesn't follow from that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will be using the same definition as he will. And I can even prove that to him. So all that we can establish is that that's his definition of rock. Right? If he said, no, it's everybody's definition of rock, then I could say, take the subject, your definition of rock. It follows that it is the same as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's definition of rock. Right? And you'd say, I accept. You would say, it follows that if we open up Google, we'll find the same definition that you just gave me in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's website. Right? And then he's kind of getting himself into a stew. You see what I'm saying? If what we're trying to get at is like an expert definition. And in the debate, it could even come up that it could even somehow come out that he doesn't believe that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is an authority on the subject. Anything that we think can come out in the debate, in some place or another. I'm mindful of the time, and I definitely want to, for those who want to stick around, I definitely want to do the prayers for Lama's propitious swift return. But any like last, I don't want to leave anybody in a place where you feel like I don't know what to like how I can't practice this in the coming week because there's something I don't understand. Is there anything like that sticking?
You really didn't know what to do with it at all, but just leave it for now. Yeah. I mean, how do the two compare? We should start with possibilities or positive definition, or and then what? Like, what's the point of it?
I see. The comparison of phenomena, well, so let me actually just come back to yesterday. Yesterday, I learned, and this is probably embarrassing, but I learned for the first time that rock and roll are not the same genre. Oh, I'm so glad that some people seem surprised. Thank you. I didn't know this, and I was like, oh my gosh, does everybody else know this? So according to my husband, at least, I don't know, but he was very clear that they're mutually exclusive, actually. And in talking about it, he explained that rock and roll comes from, oh my gosh, now I won't be able to remember. It's a combination of blues and country music. Don't quote me on that. But on the other hand, rock music actually came from something else. Like he told me what it was, but I don't remember now. So they're not even, so you talk about causal relationship and everything. So that only came up at a certain point when like he was saying something that didn't seem to make sense to me. And he said, well, how do the two compare, rock and roll? And then he said they're mutually exclusive. So I'm like, oh, it follows that whatever is rock is necessarily not rock and roll. Then yeah. And he said, take the subject, I don't know, like what was it? Tutti Frutti by Little Richard. It follows that it is not rock and roll because it is rock. The reason is not established. It follows that it is not rock. I accept. It follows that it's rock and roll. I accept. It follows that it's not rock because it's rock and roll. I accept. And I said, it follows that it's, and so well, anyway, so based on that, then I was able to say, well, then what's the definition of rock and roll? Like, what are the defining characteristics? How can you tell if it's rock and roll? And what are the defining characteristics of rock? And it ended up, we were in the car and he ended up playing for me back to back some rock and roll and some rock music from the same time. And now I get, like, I couldn't tell you the definition yet, but I was able to hear it. They're very different genres if you're drawing the line that way, right? So the comparison of phenomena, like in some cases, it might be for its own sake. It might be because you want to know how these two phenomena compare. But a lot of the time, it's a jumping off point that, like, it will lead to consequences that will lead to consequences that will then lead to something interesting, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? But it doesn't seem to answer the heart of your question. So for now, because I want to make sure we move on, but for now, so I'll just say this. What I'll say is, from the defender's point of view, the only thing you need to do is to listen to what was the last thing that the challenger said, and then figure out what is my honest answer to that within the options that I have available to me. And then just say that. That's from the defender's point of view. And the benefit of that is that you'll come out of it feeling either realizing that you had been wrong and having to rethink everything, or feeling much more confident that you know what you're talking about. Like you'll have a lot more clarity, right? That's extremely helpful. In fact, again, just to hopefully honor the question, a week ago, I think it was, my husband had to have a very difficult conversation with somebody, and he was feeling like really nervous. So he was the defender. I Tibetan debated him on what he wanted to say, And at the end, he felt really confident in what he wanted to say to the person. It was really clear to him why he was saying it, what his motivation was. At one point I said, take the subject you. It follows that it's selfish for having this conversation, And he was like, why? I said, if it's not selfish, it's not selfish because, and then he realized himself why he wasn't being selfish, why he was actually coming from a place of caring. Anyway, so that's one thing. And then if you're the challenger, then the thing to do is to think about what did the defender claim right now? If I disagree, why do I disagree? And how can I fling that as a consequence? Right? I'm going to fling it as an absurd consequence, probably. I disagree that all cats are animals because there are some cats that aren't animals, like emus are animals. So it follows that emus are animals, right? And if you agree with what they're saying, then think what might be a weak link in their understanding. Like that's what I did in that example with my husband about the conversation he had to have. Like at one point, it seemed to me that he knew what he wanted to say, but he was still feeling like maybe it would come across as selfish. So that's the weak point. Pick the subject, it follows that it's being selfish for having this conversation. And then we could debate that. Okay, I hope that helps. Let us please do the practices. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can open it so that I can share the screen. This must be very hot off the presses, huh? Because this morning it hadn't been published yet. Hold on. Let me just figure out and share this place.
It has all of them. It has all three prayers.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. So, folks, please stick around as long as.
It is 4 prayers. It is one from the Lelung, from Lelung Rinpoche.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Hold on. Share screen. If anybody has to leave, of course, at any point, I completely understand. And I would just ask that you dedicate when you do. Okay. How is that? Is that clear and visible? Yeah, big enough? Okay. I haven't seen these before, so prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So I'll just ask that we I'll keep my microphone on so that we can kind of keep at the same pace, but otherwise people mute each other just because otherwise it's cacophony. But let's recite it together. Fearless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam, father and sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Buddha, to you I make request. Soul gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of the mind generation of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. I'll just read this. His Holiness writes, I compose the swift return prayer at the request of the centers of the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana tradition in general, Kopan, Ogamin Jangchup Choling, Kacho, Yaki Ling Nunnery, and all the students of the late Rinpoche, headed by Roger Kunsang, who said that since the elucidator of the teachings, the incomparable Zopa Rinpoche, had suddenly departed to peace, a swift return prayer was needed. I also composed it because of my special connection with Rinpoche, exemplified, for instance, by the fact that when Rinpoche was still with us, he would undertake any project for me, whether big or small, just as I asked. Oh, it goes on. It is devastating that Tsopa Rinpoche has gone in this way. However, the most important thing is that when he was still with us, he made the precious mind of enlightenment the foundation of his practice. If his followers who have been left behind train properly in the Buddha's way of life, then it is exactly that which will then definitely fulfill Rinpoche's wishes. Therefore, keep this in mind. Furthermore, from now on, make requests of the 3 jewels, as well as earnest dedication prayers. Composed by the Dalai Lama, a Dharma teacher, Sakya Bhikshu, on the 24th day of the 2nd month of the year of the Latin Rabbit in the 17th Ramjuk cycle, April 15, 2003. A lamenting wail, supplication for the swift return of the Supreme Lord of Refuge, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Guru, think of me. Guru, consider me. Gracious Guru, care for me. Root Guru, most gracious and kind, do not deprive us of your compassionate refuge. Listen and consider this heartfelt prayer made by a tormented disciple. Guru, you embody the blessings of the Buddhas of the 3 times. You may rest in great bliss, equipoise, within the dhatu of unimpeded luminosity. Yet the playful dance of your loving compassion can emanate in myriad ways. The swift appearance of your magical wisdom, the Rupakaya. The time has come for you to care for us once again with your affectionate compassion. I invoke you, I call upon you, I implore you on behalf of all beings. Arise, arise, arise from the Dharmakaya. Do not rest in Kachara or other pure celestial realms. Rather, to benefit the Buddhist teachings and all living beings, swiftly return to the southern continent to spread the Buddha Dharma study and realization. Quickly return to guide us poor wretched beings. Such is the desperate cry of us, your disciples. Return so that we may actually behold your presence and receive the blessings of your enlightened body, speech, and mind. All violations, errors, mistakes, and broken samaya that we have made in relation to you are spontaneously present, awakened body, speech, mind, and activity. We are being baffled, confused, and conceiving things in erroneous ways. We confess within the luminous emptiness of your 3 kayas. Of everything auspicious, the supreme auspiciousness, may there be the auspiciousness of emptiness and compassion, conjoined, and the auspiciousness of a timely meeting between master and disciples. Through the force of the truth of unchanging suchness, may the unmistaken incarnation return quickly. This lament was made by me, a Dakini with pure faith, at Samaya, her eyes filled with tears of sorrow. May these wishes of a beggar woman be fulfilled through the blessings of the deities of the 3 roots. Perception, its object, and the act of perceiving all dissolve within the expanse, the blissful clarity of suchness. The swift return prayer to Lama Zopa Rinpoche begins with Chada Rinpoche. Patient in bearing the hardships of spreading the teachings of the Muni in general, and the teachings of the victorious Jamgon Tsongkhapa in hundreds of directions, Lord of Dharma, holding the 3 vows and wearing saffron robes, please quickly return as the glory of the peerless teachings. You held the teachings of explanation and practice with great asceticism. Unable to bear the transmigratory beings are confused by the darkness of suffering. Through your great loving kindness, you skillfully led them to happiness. Unparalleled Son of the teachings, please return quickly. Beautified by the ornament of supreme patience and increasing the practice of the supreme authentic teachings of the victorious one, through listening, reflection, and meditation. Guide of all transmigratory beings along the perfect path, true and perfect pure Guru, please return quickly. A swift return prayer to Lama Zopa Rinpoche by the 11th Lama Rinpoche. The lamp of the Gedan teachings, the supreme refuge, Lama Zopa, has departed in order to rouse to the Dharma disciples who cling to permanence. Supreme Being, you took upon yourself the Kadam teacher's way of life and were bound to it night and day, greatly benefiting the teachings and transmigratory beings. Great Master of the teachings, supreme guide for East and West, hidden yogi, Lama Tupten Zopa, unrivaled Lama Zopa, you took His Holiness, the sovereign Lord of the victorious ones, as your crown and followed all his instructions. Benefactor Lama Zopa, for the many public and personal needs of Tibetans and others, you opened the vase of resources and cleared away the suffering of hardship. One of great mind, Lama Zopa, you held helpless and voiceless animals with the mind of loving kindness and were their holy savior and protector. Siddha Lama Zopa, Lord of the ocean of mandalas, with the wings of emptiness and compassion, you cross the waters of the generation and completion stages. Lama Tibetans Zopa, great hidden yogi, ornament of the activities of the Gedan teachings, in truth, the great son of the victorious ones, having thought of me and other transmigratory beings of the degenerate age, from your seat of lotus and sun, at the heart of Sangha Yeshe, may the jewel that fulfills all wishes, emanating again with the brilliance of 10,000 suns, smile swiftly and without obstacles to our eyes filled with tears of faith. Maybe we can add, if we wish, we can think, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche would always tell us to do, due to the 3-time merits accumulated by myself, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all ordinary beings, all other beings, are completely empty of existing from their own side. May I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, quickly attain the state of perfect enlightenment, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, in order to lead all universal sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that perfectly enlightened state, which is completely empty of existing from its own side. May I do that by myself alone, which is completely empty of existing from its own side.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, everybody.
Will we dedicate any merits from our session?
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't make it clear. That last thing I said, I was thinking of as the dedication, but let's
great.
do it again since I didn't make that
I'm
clear.
kind of new to all this, but
No, not at all, not at all. I wasn't clear at all. So let's just dedicate again all the positive potentials that we've accumulated through anything we've done today, anything we thought, said, or done. All of that is empty of existing from its own side, but it definitely exists as a dependent arising. And may it be so that we may quickly become completely enlightened, which is something that is completely empty of existing from its own side, but definitely exists as a dependent arising, so that we can bring all universal sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side, but who definitely exist as a dependent arising, that perfectly enlightened state, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, but which definitely exists as a dependent arising. May we have the courage, each of us, to just set out and do this on our own. This on our own, the self that will do this on its own. It's completely empty of inherently existing, but it definitely exists as a dependent arising. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. Okay, I am late. I have to go, but I hope you guys have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And Jenna, thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing in the prayers. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Everyone, are you all interested in continuing our debate club? I've been working with Gus on dates, and I can email you all, but I just wanted to get a thumbs up. Yeah, we'll keep going. Okay, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
thank you.